Welcome to my spoiler review for Spider-Man No Way Home. This video is intended to be a discussion for those who have seen the film, so if you have not seen the movie, this video is not for you, but I did do a non-spoiler review of the movie here on the channel, so if you want to hear my thoughts on the film without going into specific plot stuff, that is the place to go. That's where you want to go, but this is for those who have seen the movie, so because we're going to go into some real detailed plot things. So, in my non-spoiler review, okay, no more warnings, here we go. I said this was probably the best live-action Spider-Man, and its only competitor to me really was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. And the reason as to why this one is going to probably edge it out by the time I see it again is because this movie had a very similar arc to Peter Parker. Not identical, but similar to Peter Parker's. And on top of that, it had a bit more emotional weight, I would say. And on top of that, it also had the characters that made Spider-Man 2 so amazing in this movie as well. See what I'm saying? So it almost had all of that stuff with more fan service, a crazier third act, and tons more fan service. I mean, this movie is like the ultimate live-action Spider-Man movie because it really does feel like Spider-Man 1 and 2 from Sam Raimi combined with the MCU Spider-Man as far as like, you know, the journey of Peter Parker into becoming a man. By the end of this movie, I mean, you saw with the red and blue suit, he truly became Spider-Man. It was very poetic. Very, very poetic. So, the cat's out of the bag now. We already knew this. It was confirmed. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield are in this movie. They do come back to reportray themselves from the previous Spider-Man movies. And I gotta say, the real highlight to me was seeing Tobey on screen again after many, many years was the highlight for me. It was a lot of fun seeing him there. Although he did feel like an older and more seasoned Spider-Man. Obviously, he is older. It did feel like a Spider-Man who, I mean, he had back problems. You know, that awesome scene where he got his back cracked by Andrew Garfield was just really, really fun. And their interactions were all great. And I loved how, you know, he's got his own sort of history with Uncle Ben and whatnot. And then obviously, the Garfield Spider-Man has a very similar backstory, but not quite the same. He's dealing with the guilt of the death of Gwen Stacy, which really ended up having a bit of closure in this movie when he saved MJ when Tom Holland couldn't do it. To me, that was great. Like, what I was surprised about when I saw this movie, we knew that the villains were coming back. We knew the Spider-Man were coming back. The leaks had been out there. Some of the leaks were very true. Some were not. Some of the rumored deaths were true, and some were not. It's interesting. I was surprised as to how much I liked Andrew's character. He comes in, and he's a guy who's been wanting to be taken seriously as an actor, and those amazing movies don't get that much love at all from the fandom or from anybody. They never get any real acclaim. And he, you know, they have some meta stuff here, how he's like down on himself, and, you know, Toby's like, no, dude, you're amazing. Like, all those little interactions between them, that's really what I wanted. I think people were expecting, some folks may have been expecting these guys to be in the entire movie. I was not expecting that. But I was also worried they were only going to be in, like, you know, maybe the last 10 minutes. But no, they had plenty of time. They had development as far as finding out what kind of had happened to them and how, even though they had been through tragedy, they had to keep going because that's just what we do. And I really liked that message. That was the real message of the movie, is that, like Aunt May said, and then Toby would later say, with great power comes great responsibility. And she says the line in the film, and I was worried about how it may have actually, that may have been a mistake to have her say it, but it made sense the way they did it. The way that Aunt May's death happened, where she didn't really know how injured she was until she actually passed, and the way that Tom Holland's acting chops really kicked in right there for that death scene, you know, it was really, really heart-wrenching. It was really good stuff. Very sad, very, very sad, but a good linchpin for his character to grow, and that wasn't the only thing that he gave up. He not only gave up his maternal figure, he also gave up his girlfriend, because that ending where they have to wipe everyone's minds of Peter Parker's existence, that was a very interesting choice. Let me give my thoughts on that here in just a minute, okay? But I want to get back to Andrew. I like that Andrew's Peter Parker, he was a lot of fun. I mean, he came on there, very much like a performer, very much, showing off his comedic timing, his charisma. And then, Toby was more chill, more, like I said, more seasoned. I love how they kind of talked about, what happened to Toby since. It wasn't enough, though. I kind of wish we would have heard more. He said that they made it work, him and Mary Jane, but I would have loved it if there was more details on that. Because I mean, it's been 15 years, right? Something like that, almost 15 years. I would love to know what happened there. They did do a pretty good job of explaining what happened to the villains and how they were kind of removed from their reality right before they died, even though it wasn't really explained as to why it was right before they died. Maybe that's just how the spell works. But that was, I thought, that one made sense. And I really liked sort of the interaction between them as well. Like, I really liked the interaction between when they're all in the cell and in Doctor Strange's dungeon, and everything with Doc Ock. And Alfred Molina's an amazing actor, but man, Willem Dafoe, dude. I mean, look, I think a lot of young people only know Willem Dafoe from a few movies here and there, like maybe the Raimi Spider-Man movies and Lighthouse. This guy has a whole career of incredible work. I mean, going all the way back to movies like Platoon and The Last Temptation of Christ. I mean, the man is a legitimate legend, and he proved it once again in this movie. And one thing I really did like about the Green Goblin character is that they quickly explained to us, and this was something that was always kind of hinted at in the Raimi movies, but I think John Watts kind of took it to the next level here, is they hinted to us that, not hinted, but actually straight up said that the Green Goblin is not the Green Goblin because he puts the mask on and the mask makes him evil. The mask is a representation of his dark side, his psychosis. The man has legitimate psychosis, and we see that later in the film. But the question I have for Green Goblin, and this did take me out of the film, this was to me, I think people will nitpick this, and I just want an answer. And there probably is an answer. I just don't know what it is yet. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong here, but did Green Goblin take the superhero serum here, or the super soldier serum? Because I don't remember Green Goblin ever being this powerful. I mean, he was so damn strong that when he knocked Spider-Man through the floor and, like, they're having that fight in the apartment, first of all, that was awesome. I mean, that was a great fight. But then by the end of the film, when Peter goes nuts and he starts to swing at this guy, he's swinging at him with full force punches. I mean, he's not pulling his punches. He is swinging to kill. And in the MCU, it was established that this Spider-Man has an incredible freaking strength. We saw that in the Captain America fight in Civil War. We saw that during some of the stuff in where he's lifting, he's like moving characters that are way heavier than him around in Infinity War and Endgame. Like, this dude has incredible strength, right? Spider-Man has incredible strength. And meanwhile, he's punching this dude in the face hard. He's punching him hard, as hard as he can at the end. And he doesn't die. Green Goblin does not die. Did this guy take something off screen? Was there like a scene that was cut maybe where they explained that? I thought he's way stronger than he should be. So that did take me out of the movie. It took me out of that scene. And then when he's trying to kill the Goblin at the end, and then Toby steps in and then gets stabbed from behind, I saw it coming. But he survived. I think there were rumors that there were 3 endings of this movie shot. I think that in one of the endings, Toby did die. Remember, guys, we heard that spoiler over a year ago, I want to say, that Toby dies in this movie. I covered it here on the channel. And I think that may have been one of the endings that was shot, because I remember hearing that they purposely shot like 3 different endings so that nobody would leak the true ending. And that's one of the things that I think makes sense here. The sound effect, the way he lunged him from behind. I think there might be a whole other sequence with Toby just like straight up actually dying that may have been shot for this movie. Now, like I said, besides that, the chemistry with the characters I thought was great. I really love that it was Aunt May who wanted Peter to give these guys a second chance. And as I'm watching the film, and I'm seeing that he's trying to give them a second chance, that whole scene of them going to his apartment was funny, dude. That was good stuff. And just having them kind of hang out there. There was a lot of that going around that I really enjoyed. Thomas Hayden Church, tons of charisma. I mean, Jamie Foxx, tons of charisma. We know this. And sort of Jamie Foxx struggling with, his electrified powers. He wants to keep them. It's like an addiction to him. And, the Lizard has his sort of way of seeing things. And, all Peter wanted to do was cure them. That's what he wanted to do, is cure them. And the only one he was able to cure initially was Doc Ock, who wound up being a big hero at the end, which was a pleasant surprise. I thought they were going to have to fight him at the end. But no, he wound up being a big hero at the end, helping them. I mean, he's the one who kind of beat Electro. And that was cool. And it gives closure to that character. Like, this movie was a happy ending for the other Spider-Man movies. You know what I mean? Like, Green Goblin was able to get redeemed and cured of his illness. Doc Ock was. Lizard, Electro, and Sandman were all cured of their illnesses that made them become villains in the first place. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought for sure that by the end they were all going to die, or at least some would get cured and some would die. But they all survived. They all survived and went back to their universes, and everything was put back into balance again. I really like that. And that's a part of the reason as to why I did not want this movie to end, because those little scenes of them together, whether it be the Spider-Man or the villains together, or even the villains with Spider-Man, even like the stuff where they're cracking jokes in Doctor Strange's laboratory or whatever dungeon, and like he's over here like, I'm going to help you guys out. Like, he's trying to do the best he can to help them. Very few superheroes are going to take time to actually help out their villains, and most of the time it backfires on them. This time they made it work with the help of the other Spider-Man, because had they not shown up, it was over. But they did, and I loved that little pep talk. I loved the pep talk they had. With the other Spider-Man talking to our Peter, the MCU Peter. That was beautiful. And the fact that he was ready to give up, but they were at the same, they hit the same crossroads. And it was never as serious of a test as this was. I like this a lot. Like, I can't believe how good this movie was. I can't believe, like I said, the only real complaint I have is that I wish it had kept going. It was so much fun, and it must be seen with an audience. It's too bad that there's people who pirate movies, and I'm guilty of doing it in the past when I was younger and all. But movies like this and like Endgame, like, they have to be seen with an audience because people went nuts. Dude, at the beginning of the movie, he only had one cameo scene, Charlie Cox, and even that, people went nuts for that scene. They were clapping, they were cheering, like. And keep in mind, that was literally, a day after the big reveal from Hawkeye? Like, that big reveal, which I won't get into here in case you haven't seen that show. Like, there's a lot of good 48 hours for Marvel fans. Been eating good for the past 48 hours, you know what I'm saying? Also, was it just me, or did you notice that scene where Spider-Man gets green paint thrown on him, that turned out to be, that wasn't in the movie? Like, that was cut out of the film. There were some things that were definitely cut out of this film, so I wonder if in some of the screeners that we saw, if maybe Ned did die. Not that we saw, but that the leakers saw. Maybe Ned did die. Maybe Happy Hogan did die. Like I said, there may have been different cuts of this film to fool leakers, because some of the stuff that they said was absolutely right. I mean, very right. The fight in the Statue of Liberty at the end, just total acrobatic craziness, having them all figure out how to work together as a team, and having the MCU Peter be the one that has the most experience doing that, even though I kind of wish that Toby was later because he had the most experience. That's okay. He's not really an Avenger. And I love when the Avengers get brought up and Andrew's like, are you in a band? Like, that's pretty neat how they had those kind of, that fish out of water, like, they're all finding out about each other. That was great. So I knew they were going to do that, but I was just so happy that they actually spent that much time together. Like, when they were in there being scientists, I thought that was a necessary and important scene to illustrate that Peter Parker, no matter what version you're watching, is a nerd. Like, that's who he is, man. And that goes and ties to the end of the movie, how when everything is said and done, the world, and I'm going to talk about this now here in a minute, is the world forgot about who Peter Parker was. They know who Spider-Man is, but they forgot who Peter Parker was. And thus, even his loved ones know who he is. But now, Peter has to basically start over again. I mean, he's got to go in there and, He's got to go in there and get a job. He's got a hotel. No more living the easy life with Happy. Like, you're not going to get any more breaks. You know, in the first two movies, some called it Iron Boy, because that's pretty much what he was. And he kind of had it easy. This was the movie where he's going to begin to struggle now. Now the story of Peter Parker in the MCU is now you're going to have to struggle because nobody knows who you really are. And it was powerful. It was a powerful ending. He had to say goodbye to his girlfriend. He had to say goodbye to his aunt, and even goodbye to Happy, and you know, who's a tie-in to his mentor. I mean, I would have been crying my eyes out. I would have been crying my eyes out if I had to make that sacrifice. I didn't cry in the movie, but I'm saying if I were that character, tell me you wouldn't too, dude. You lose your aunt, your girl, and your identity literally within 48 hours or however long it was, you know, a day or whatever, maybe a couple days. And you do it for the right reasons, but still, like, it's gotta be a lonely life being Peter Parker, you know, and that's why you are happy for Toby's Parker to find someone. Poor Andrew, you know, but I'm glad they paid off the Andrew stuff. They paid off storylines that I wasn't expecting. Even having, like, Doc Ock reunite with Toby was an incredible, that people have been waiting years for that, dude. Otto, you know, Peter, like, they were so happy to see each other. Like, people waited years for that, man. Also, Doctor Strange was great in this movie. Benedict Cumberbatch, he's great as, like, the mentor. They were pretty smart to figure out how to write him out of the movie. And it started making a lot more sense as the movie went on as to what they were going to do with him. But let me tell you, man, that sequence with the mirror world was insane, yo. Like, when you actually see the full sequence in the full IMAX like I did, dude, that sequence is insane. Like, we've seen some crazy sequences in Doctor Strange movies, and of course, Strange versus Thanos, the great fight. This was just incredible. And the fact that Spider-Man had to use geometry to win, you know, because the nerd, that was good stuff. Even though it's like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, I'm watching the movie, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing right now? Like, you're causing some real problems here. And ultimately, it's his fault that he lost his aunt, because had he not done that, it would have never led to that. But it's the same thing. I mean, again, it's like what Toby said, you know, I lost Ben Parker. I lost Uncle Ben. That was my fault, you know. That's how it is, man. And they had to forgive themselves. And ultimately, Peter was right, because they wound up saving the villains. So, I mean, you know, that was kind of a, you know, and also, what about the nod to Miles Morales? I got a huge pop when Jamie Foxx, like, I wanted a black Spider-Man. But that was a little bit of a plot hole, because maybe I'm wrong, but Doctor Strange said earlier in the film that the only reason that they crossed over is because they knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, including the other Peter Parkers. Okay, that's fine. That's okay. That's the way it is. But when did Electro find out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man? And if he was, then he would have known. And he would have known he wasn't a black Spider-Man. So I feel like that was kind of put in there just to be an Easter egg, but didn't make much sense. So I got to talk about where we go from here. Like, I'm going to do a whole video on this, but I am a bit confused. So the world does not remember Peter Parker, but they remember Spider-Man. That makes sense, except for with Happy and other characters that were close to him. So he knew May because of Spider-Man, but he doesn't remember Peter Parker. So here's what I don't know. Like, are some of their memories just like blank? Or is it like they remember a person but not Peter Parker? Or do they remember, like, in their own memories, right? Are there memories like of Peter, but he's wearing the Spider-Man costume and his face is like, you know, blurred out or whatever? Like, I want to know what he, like, that's weird to me. Okay. You can't even deny that's a sloppy ending. I mean, it's a sloppy ending because I have questions. You know, not sloppy in the way it was edited or written, but just sloppy in the way that it was, like, I don't understand. Like, this is an unsolved mystery here. Same thing with, like, it goes back to, like, how, you know, Hawkeye's wife's cell phone was still working after 5 years. You know, that didn't make any sense. Even though some could make it make sense, it's not really explained well enough. Like, there's just things that, you know, these movies do that you have to kind of forgive, you know what I mean, and just kind of let go. But this one, I think, could have a major implication, because I don't know if we're done with the MCU Peter Parker. We might not be done with this character yet, so we have to eventually make everything right? Also, if the Goblin's going back to his world a healed man, that means that he didn't die. Does that mean that Harry is dead, though? Like, those are questions. Or maybe he's going back to a variant of his timeline. Either way, that shot of the three Spider-Men on the Statue of Liberty, bro, that money shot was great. The costumes looked accurate. Like, seeing them on screen together, just, they have a lot of charisma. And man, these actors straight up lied, didn't they? But they had to lie. Like, they had to lie because they are under contracts, and this was a big surprise. And, they kept it a secret from a lot of people, even though it was the worst kept secret in Hollywood. Like, I believe it was Andy Signor that broke the story. So credit to Movie World on YouTube, because that's who broke the story literally a year and a half ago. And here we are. Here we are. They're going to make more Spider-Man movies. I don't know if we're ever going to get one that's ever going to be as celebrated as this one. Oh, yeah, wait, I can't go yet. I got to talk about the mid-credit scene. But before I do, I wanted to just quickly say that we're not going to get a movie like this one again. I think they can keep the story going with the Tom Holland Parker. I think they will, but they're going to have to kind of hit the reset button now and kind of slow things down a bit and kind of start over again, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with that. It's just, will a Spider-Man movie ever come around to top this one? I mean, maybe, but this is going to be a tough one to top. It's going to be tough to top as far as live action goes. Across the Spider-Verse Part 1 is next year, but Into the Spider-Verse is probably still, I have to watch it again, but that one I think probably had the best story. But this one was right up there, man. You know what? Let me watch this one again and then give my thoughts. I might actually like it a tiny bit more, but again, that is very subjective because Spider-Verse has almost like virtually no issues, man. That's a very well-made movie. And Miles Morales in that movie is great. And I feel like they are teasing a Miles Morales Sony, like live action Miles Morales. So maybe we'll get that in the future as well. All right, mid-credit scene. So there's a piece of the symbiote left behind. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be evil? Is it going to mix with somebody who's good or evil? Like what happened with Carnage? I wonder. Will we see the MCU version of the Black Costume Saga? I'd like to see that. Then that would mean we'd have to have an MCU version of Eddie Brock, right? It was a bit of a letdown, to be honest with you, though, that we didn't see him stay, because I remember hearing that rumor that Eddie Brock was going to stay, that Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock was going to stay in this world and eventually get a job at the Daily Bugle with Peter. But I don't know, man. I don't know. They didn't do that. And so I guess Venom 3 is going to be, its own thing, which I'm fine with it. But it's just, I was kind of hoping that would happen. Then we had the Doctor Strange trailer, which actually leaked online. I might do a separate video. Actually, I will do a separate video about that because, man, they are going cameo heavy with that one. So we'll talk about that there. So anyways, Spider-Man No Way Home, huge thumbs up. I mean, it's a capstone movie. It really is like the end game of Spider-Man movies. I will say this. If you haven't seen the other Spider-Man movies, it is a hard one to follow, especially with the Easter eggs. It's meant for people who have seen them, even if it's just one time. So do yourself a favor and watch the other Spider-Man movies. And I mean not just the MCU ones. I mean like the Andrew and Tobey ones. You have to watch those because if you don't, you're going to lose a lot of the subtext. You're going to lose a lot of the context. And that's important. But man, what a great movie. We have so much more videos to come talking about this film in the next couple of weeks. Christmas is coming up and yeah, man, Merry Christmas. I'll have my Matrix review up next week early and we'll talk about it then. So thank you. Have a great day. And yeah, we'll talk soon.